I'm wiping down the bar at a beachside pub in Byron Bay when this American woman in her 50s waves me over like she's hailing a cab in Manhattan. "Excuse me, do you take real money here?" She's holding up a $50 bill. Australian. I blink at her. That is real money, ma'am. That's our currency." She shakes her head, looking annoyed. "No, I mean American dollars. Real money." The entire bar goes quiet. Even the pokies seem to stop dinging for a second. If you've already spotted what's really happening here, that tiny cultural blind spot most people miss, this channel's where we unpack that every week. Subscribe if you prefer decoding reality over just laughing at it. It was a humid Thursday afternoon, the kind where the air sticks to your skin. This wasn't my first rodeo with confused tourists, but something about her tone made it clear. She genuinely believed we'd prefer her currency. When I explained we use Australian dollars here, she sighed like I was the one being difficult. "Well, can you at least tell me the exchange rate?" I pointed to the bank across the street. She left her drink unfinished. That same week, I watched the American businessman at the hotel I work at try to tip the receptionist $20 for checking him in. She politely declined 3 times. He got frustrated and left the cash on the counter anyway, saying, "You earned it, sweetheart." She donated it to the RSPCA the next day. The look on his face when she wouldn't take it, pure confusion. Like he'd offered her gold, and she'd said, "No thanks." Then there was the guy at Bondi, who asked a lifeguard if they accepted credit cards for rescues. The lifeguard, Damo, just stared at him. "Mate, it's free. We just save people." The American laughed nervously. "Nothing's free, buddy. What's the catch?" Damo walked away, shaking his head. Later that day, the same bloke complained about the beach not having enough American flags. We were in Australia. My cousin works at Sydney Airport Customs. She told me about a family from Texas who arrived with 3 suitcases full of canned food. When asked why, the dad said, "We heard Australia's pretty remote. Figured you might not have grocery stores." They were staying in Darlinghurst, central Sydney. She had to explain that yes, we have Woolies, we have Coles, we even have IGA. The kids looked disappointed, like they'd been promised an adventure and got civilization instead. But that was just the beginning of a very long summer tourist season. The worst one happened at a cafe in Melbourne's CBD. I was working the register at this trendy spot on Flinders Lane. Around 11 in the morning, an American couple in their 30s walked in, both wearing identical university hoodies. They ordered 2 flat whites and some smashed avo. Total came to $32. The guy handed me a $100 bill. American. I explained we don't take US currency. He looked at me like I'd just denied physics. "But the American dollar is stronger," he said, completely serious. His girlfriend nodded along. I tried explaining that yes, the USD has a different exchange rate, but that doesn't mean we accept it as payment. That's not how countries work. He wanted to speak to my manager. My manager, Steph, came out and said the exact same thing I did. The guy then asked if we took Venmo. "We're in Australia, mate. We don't have Venmo here. We use bank transfers or PayPal if we're doing digital payments." The situation escalated when he started Googling currency exchange rates on his phone, showing Steph the screen like it was evidence in a trial. "See? $1 Australian dollar is worth $0.63 US. So technically, I'm overpaying you." Steph, bless her patience, explained that's not how purchasing works. You pay in the country's currency. This is the pattern I track. How good intentions turn into cultural arrogance without anyone realizing. I break these down weekly, so the next time you travel, you actually see what's happening underneath the awkward moments. Subscribe if that kind of awareness is your thing. He left a 1-star review on Google saying we were anti-American and refused legal tender. That review stayed up for 8 months. A week later, I'm at a petrol station in Geelong helping my mate who owns the place. American tourists in a rental camper van pull up. The woman comes in holding a credit card, asks if we take international cards. My mate says yes, of course. Visa and MasterCard work worldwide. She seems relieved. Then she asks if there's a tourist discount for Americans. He thinks she's joking. She's not. She explains that in some countries, Americans get special treatment because we're good for business. My mate, who's never been diplomatic a day in his life, just laughs. Love, you're paying the same as everyone else. Petrol's already expensive enough. She looks genuinely offended, like he's broken some unspoken rule. Her husband comes in asking where the nearest embassy is. The American Embassy. In Geelong, my mate points him toward Melbourne, about an hour away, but tells him there's really no emergency here. The bloke insists he needs to report discriminatory pricing. They drove off without filling up. Then there's the Gold Coast incident my sister told me about. She works at a resort in Surfers Paradise. An American family checked in, stayed 3 nights, had a lovely time by all accounts. When they checked out, the father handed her a stack of US 20s as a tip, probably $200 worth. She thanked him but explained she couldn't accept foreign currency as a tip. He took it personally, started saying how, back home, people appreciate generosity. She tried explaining it wasn't about appreciation, it's just that she'd have to go to a currency exchange, pay fees, and it's complicated. He left the money on the counter and walked out, muttering about ungrateful Aussies. The thing is, it's not about being ungrateful. It's about practicality. You can't just walk into a Woolies and buy milk with Thai baht. You can't pay your rent in Japanese yen. It's not a global currency system where everything's interchangeable. But try explaining that to someone who's convinced. Their money works everywhere because it's American. I had another bloke at the pub last month try to buy rounds for the whole bar, using the American Express card. Not weird in itself, except he kept asking why we needed to validate his card. It's called processing a transaction, mate. Then he got shirty when the conversion rate wasn't favorable. This is robbery! You're charging me extra just because I'm American. I had to explain that exchange rates aren't something I control. They fluctuate based on global markets. He accused me of lying and said he'd call his bank. Go ahead, mate. Citibank will tell you the same thing. Working at a backpacker hostel in Cairns taught me that Americans have a very different relationship with service staff. I'm checking in this college kid from Oregon, maybe 22 years old, doing a gap year. Nice enough bloke, friendly. But then he asks where his bellhop is. I tell him we don't have bellhops. It's a hostel. You carry your own bags. He looks confused. But I'm paying to stay here. I nod. You're paying $18 a night for a bed in a 6-person dorm. That doesn't include porter service. He seems genuinely thrown by this. Asks if there's an upgrade available. I explain the private rooms, which are $60 a night, but you still carry your own bags. He asks about room service. Mate, this is a hostel. There's a communal kitchen. You make your own food or go out. He looks around like he's just realized he's not at a Hilton. Eventually he adjusts, but that first hour, you could see him recalculating his entire trip. Later that week, an older American couple in their 60s checked in. Lovely people, very polite. But they kept asking about daily housekeeping. I explained that in hostels, you generally make your own bed and keep your area clean. They looked horrified. The wife said, "But we're on vacation. We shouldn't have to clean." I tried to clarify that it's just basic tidying, not scrubbing floors. They ended up checking out after one night and moving to a hotel. Left a review saying the hostel had no service standards. That's the point, love. It's budget accommodation. The restaurant scene is worse. I picked up shifts at a steakhouse in Darwin during the dry season. American tourists everywhere. One night, his family comes in, party of 5. They order, food comes out, everything seems fine. Then the dad calls me over. "Where's our server?" "I'm your server, mate. I took your order, brought your drinks, delivered your food." He shakes his head. "No, I mean the person who's supposed to check on us every 5 minutes." I explain that's not really how we do things here. We give you space to enjoy your meal. He's not having it. Says it's bad service, that I haven't refilled their waters 3 times, or asked how their food is repeatedly. I offer to refill the waters now. He waves me off, annoyed. Later, they leave a 8% tip with a note that says, "Service needs improvement." My manager read it and laughed. We don't have a tipping culture here, and even if we did, badgering customers every 2 minutes isn't our style. The family left a TripAdvisor review saying Australian restaurants lack attentiveness. We were fully booked that next weekend anyway. There was this American woman at a cafe in Adelaide who sent back her coffee 3 times. "Too weak," she said. "Then too strong. Then too hot." My coworker, who's a trained barista, was losing his mind. Finally, he asked what she normally drinks in America. She described something that sounded like a latte with 4 pumps of vanilla syrup and extra foam. He made exactly that. She took 1 sip and said, "See? Why couldn't you just do this from the start?" "Because you ordered a flat white, love. That's a different drink." She left without tipping, which wasn't expected anyway. But she made sure to tell us we'd never make it in the American service industry. We're not trying to mate. The entitlement reaches bizarre levels sometimes. A bloke at a Brisbane hotel where my brother works as a concierge asked if someone could walk his dog for him. The hotel doesn't offer dog walking services. He said, "Well, what do you people do for work then?" My brother explained he arranges tours, books restaurants, provides local recommendations. The American laughed. So basically, nothing useful. He ended up walking his own dog, shocked that he had to do something himself while on vacation. The Harbour Bridge incident is legendary among Sydney tour guides. I heard it from my mate Jess, who does walking tours. She had an American couple in their 40s on a history tour. Everything's going fine until they get to the bridge. The husband asks why there's no American flag flying. Jess explains it's an Australian landmark in Australia, so we fly the Australian flag. He seems bothered by this. Says something about how America helped build modern Australia and should be recognized. Jess, who has a history degree, politely corrects him. She explains Australia's history, federation, independence. The wife interrupts, "But without American culture, you guys would have nothing." Jess is stunned. She asks what she means. The wife lists off American fast food chains, Hollywood movies, and tech companies as if Australia would cease to exist without them. Jess points out we have our own film industry, our own cuisine, our own technology sector. The couple doesn't believe her. They think everything modern is American by default. It got weirder when the husband asked if Australia has its own military or if we're protected by the US military. Jess explained that yes, we have the Australian Defence Force. It's actually quite capable. The bloke seemed skeptical. "But you'd need us if something happened, right?" Jess ended the tour early. She told me later it was the first time someone had made her genuinely angry on a tour. The couple left a review saying she was hostile to Americans and spreading anti-US propaganda. She framed it. "I've got a cousin who works at Parliament House in Canberra doing educational tours. She's had multiple Americans ask why we still have a queen if we're an independent country. Fair question, actually, and she explains the constitutional monarchy situation. But then they ask why we don't just join America. She has to explain that Australia is a sovereign nation with its own government, laws, and international relationships. Some people get it. Others argue that it would be better for everyone if we became a U.S. state. One family from Florida genuinely tried to convince her that Australia should become the 51st state. Their reasoning? You already speak English, and you like freedom. She asked if they'd considered that Australians might prefer their own country. The dad said, "But think about the benefits. You'd get American protection, American businesses, American leadership." She asked what benefits Australia would get that we don't already have. He couldn't answer. Just kept saying it made sense. without explaining why. The strangest one happened at a museum in Hobart. I was visiting and overheard this American teen arguing with a museum guide. The exhibit was about Australian involvement in World War II. The kid insisted that America won the war and Australia barely participated. The guide, this patient elderly woman who probably knew veterans personally, explained the Pacific Theater, the Kokoda Track, the Australian divisions in North Africa and Europe. The kid just shook his head, said his teacher told him America won the war single-handedly. The guide looked tired. She'd probably had this conversation before. There's this assumption baked into some of these interactions that Australia exists in America's shadow, that we're somehow dependent or subordinate. A businessman at a conference in Perth told my uncle that Australia is basically America's little brother in the Pacific. My uncle, who's never been one for patience, asked him to name 3 Australian prime ministers. The bloke couldn't. Asked him to explain Australia's economy beyond mining and tourism. Nothing. Told him to describe our political system. Blank stare. My uncle walked away. Later, the American complained to organizers about rude locals. They didn't care. I think the breaking point for me was at a New Year's Eve party in Sydney. American tourists everywhere, which is fine. But this one group kept loudly complaining about the fireworks. Not that they were bad, but that they weren't as good as American fireworks. They hadn't even seen American New Year's fireworks in person. They just assumed. When someone pointed out that Sydney's NYE fireworks are globally famous and watched by 1 billion people, they said, "Yeah, but American ones are probably better." You can't argue with that level of assumption. It's not based on facts or experience. It's just belief. The belief that American versions of things are superior by default. Never mind that Australia has its own innovations, our own culture, our own way of doing things that works for us. The idea that we might not need American validation, American currency, American service standards, or American approval, that doesn't compute for some people. The best story, though, came from my dad's mate, who drives taxis in Alice Springs. He picks up an American couple at the airport, both in their 30s, here to see Uluru. The entire drive, the husband is on his phone loudly conducting business calls. Very important businessman vibes. When they arrive at the hotel, he hands my dad's mate a $5 American bill as a tip. My mate looks at it, looks at him and says, "Thanks, but I can't really use this here." The American gets defensive. "That's a $5 tip on a $30 fare." "That's generous," my mate nods. "It would be if it was Australian dollars. But this is US currency, and I'd have to go to a bank, exchange it, pay fees. I'd end up with maybe $3 Australian after all that." The businessman looks annoyed. "Are you seriously complaining about a tip right now?" My mate shakes his head. Not complaining, just explaining why foreign currency doesn't work as a tip here. The wife tries to smooth things over, offers to transfer money digitally instead. My mate says that's kind, but not necessary. It's not expected to tip taxi drivers here anyway. The husband explodes. Not expected to tip? What kind of backward country is this? My mate, who's been driving cabs for 20 years and has seen everything, just smiles. The kind where workers get paid a living wage and don't have to rely on tips to survive. "Have a nice stay." The couple stands there in shocked silence as he drives away. Later, the hotel concierge told my mate that the same couple spent their entire stay complaining about Australia being uncivilized because we don't tip. They cut their trip short by 3 days, flew home early, left reviews on multiple sites about how Australia is behind the times and doesn't appreciate American tourists. The hotel manager responded to one review with a simple, "Australian service standards prioritize fair wages over tipping culture. We hope you find what you're looking for elsewhere." Here's the thing about cultural exchange. It has to go both ways. You can't show up in someone else's country expecting them to change their entire system to accommodate your assumptions. Australia isn't America. We're not trying to be America. We've got our own history, our own economy, our own way of doing things. Sometimes that means you can't use your currency here. Sometimes that means service looks different. Sometimes that means we don't fly your flag or validate your expectations. And these stories? They never stop coming. Every summer, every tourist season, there's a new wave of people shocked to discover that Australia is, in fact, Australian. That we have our own identity separate from American influence. That we don't need validation or approval or special treatment. We're just here, doing our thing, on the other side of the world. If that's surprising to you, maybe the problem isn't Australia. Maybe it's the assumption that everywhere should work like home.